So, a year after I graduated high school, I moved to Israel to live on a kibbutz. I was told that a kibbutz is sort of this socialist utopia where these Jewish intellectuals would gather and start the revolution through the redemptive power of labor, and it was going to be this incredible thing, and I was going to dive right in. And I also was told that kibbutz girls were horny for Americans. So I went and I learned two things very quickly. I learned right away that a kibbutz is less a socialist utopia and a little bit more like a less Jewish suburb in Long Island. It's full of greasy dudes that are getting drunk on light beer all the time and say stuff like, socialism, that's for pussies, bro. And it's kind of like Ronkonkoma with less synagogues. And the other thing that I learned right away is that kibbutz girls were horny for American men. I was an 18-year-old American boy that looked like a 12-year-old Hasidic girl. They were not interested in me. So there was going to be no revolution, there was going to be no socialist hand jobs, there was going to be none of it, and all I could do was throw myself into the idea that I could have redemptive labor. Whatever that meant, I wanted it really badly. And my first job was in the dairy. I would show up at 6 in the morning the first day, and my boss, this British expat named Willie, hands me this this knife, and he says, your job for the next 8 hours is to scrape the caked on, dried up cow shit off of every surface in the entire dairy, which was my job for 8 hours a day, 6 days a week for the next 3 months. And it was not redemptive. But I was like, you know what? The rest of these guys seem to be doing really heavy duty work, and it seems like they're really happy, and if I just keep my head down and work really hard, maybe I'll get to do the fun stuff. And then one day I show up at the 3 o'clock in the morning shift, and Willie's there waiting for me. He's got this shit-eating grin on his face, and he says, I got someone I'd like you to meet. And I go with him into the other room, and there waiting for me is this tall, skinny guy with this pencil mustache, and he's smoking a 100. He looks like a creepier John Waters. And I say, hi, I'm Aaron. And he takes this long pull on his cigarette and he goes, I'm Doo-Doo. I am the Inseminator. Which is a terrible name for anyone, let alone an inseminator. But I am going to be his assistant. Whatever Doo-Doo needs me to do, I'm going to do for him. And it turns out what Doo-Doo needs me to do is two things. He needs me to keep track of the list, which is a list of all the cows' numbers and the corresponding bull semen that they're going to be inseminated with. Doo-Doo wears a holster with dozens of syringes that are 2 feet long, and each one contains a different bull's semen, and the right semen has to go into the right cow because you don't want cow fathers impregnating cow daughters. That's hillbilly cow stuff. But more importantly, they're trying to do this selective breeding thing. They want the cows to have the right genetic material, and so you can't fuck this up. So that's the first thing I'm supposed to do. The second thing I'm supposed to do is hold the cow's tail up in the air, and you do that because it cuts off a nerve, which prevents the cow from kicking. And you need to do that really well, because if you don't, you're going to get kicked in the chest, because what Doo-Doo is about to do is horrifying. I don't know if you've seen nature shows or Jackass or lots of view porn, but basically here's what happens. I hold up the tail. Doo-Doo inserts his right arm into the cow's asshole, up to his shoulder. From there, he grabs the birth canal from the inside and pulls it straight. He then removes one of the syringes from his holster, puts it into the cow's vagina up to his elbow, depresses the plunger, thus completing the circle of life as God intended. The first time I saw it, I basically almost passed out. The 10th time, I was on peyote. The world was melting around me. All I could see was John Waters fist fucking a cow over and over and over again. And we get to the second to last cow, and I read off the number, and I hold up the cow's tail, and in goes the right arm, and out comes the syringe, and in it goes up to the elbow into the cow's vagina, and that's when I realize I've made a mistake, and I say, wait, Doo-Doo, that's the wrong bull semen, which is something you never expect to scream in your life. And Doo-Doo pulls out the syringe, and he looks at it, and I'm right. It's the wrong one. But now we're in a quandary, because he can't put the syringe back in his holster. It's been contaminated, and that would ruin the syringe that's still good in his holster. He can't put it on the ground because the same thing. It would ruin the syringe that he's got in his hand. This is very, very high-quality bull semen, and Dudu has had to do terrible things to harvest this bull semen, and he's not going to ruin it. And he can't give it to me because if he gives it to me, I have to let go of the cow's tail, and then we're going to get kicked in the chest. And that's when I see Dudu put the syringe that is dripping with cow juice in the one place that he can put it, right into his mouth. And then he quickly takes out the other syringe and goes, boom, boom. And then he looks at me and he says, "It is very sterile." And then he says, "Don't fucking tell anybody." And I go home that day and I take this like really long hot shower. And all I can think about is that if that's what it takes to have like a redemptive labor experience, if I have to French kiss a cow's vagina by proxy, I'm not sure I want what it takes. The next 2 days are kind of like in a haze. Like I sort of just like go through the motions, but I'm like contemplating going home early and maybe I should just go to Thailand and freak out on drugs. Like I'm not sure. That Friday I show up to work and Willie's waiting for me. And this time he doesn't have a smile on his face. He says, he's got this like terrible, like kind of anxious look, and he says, "I need your help right now." And he goes running off into the night, and I go running after him. And I find him in this lit area, and there's this cow who's pregnant, and she's giving birth. Now, I don't know if you've seen City Slickers, and like Billy Crystal has this kind of like lovely moment. It's hard, it's a little bit gross, but like it's, you know, it's wonderful in the end. It's nothing what cow birth is like. It's terrifying. And this cow is kind of like mooing, and there's this like two little paws and like a snout sticking out. And Willie attaches these ropes to the cow's hoofs, and then attaches the ropes to a car jack and starts like ratcheting this calf out of the cow. And it's not working, and the cow's freaking out, and Willie's freaking out, and he says, "Push, man, push." And I like throw my shoulder against the cow's ass and I start pushing and he's pulling and there's piss everywhere. And then Willie says, "We need to do an episiotomy." And I say, "A what?" And he says, "An episiotomy." And I say, "A what?" And he says, "An episiotomy, the surgical widening of the cervix." And he pulls out a Bowie knife from his boot and he just goes to town. And then all of a sudden there's this like, and the cat falls to the ground. And it's just covered in goop. And it's not breathing. And Willie says, "We have to do CPR." And the last time I did CPR was on a dummy in 4th grade babysitting class. But he says, "Blow, man." And that's when I find myself holding this calf's snout and blowing into its nostrils. And Willie starts doing compressions, and I'm blowing, and he's compressing, and I'm blowing, and then he just pushes me off, and he just leans back, and he punches the calf in the chest. And the calf kind of like shudders and goes, "Eh," and then stands up and goes and feeds from his mother. And Willie and I kind of collapse on the hay, just exhausted. And I'm waiting for something to happen. Like, I'm waiting for like my like Curly moment, you know, like I'm waiting for something, like I want this, like the heavens open up, redemption come, like what's happening? And nothing is happening. All I feel is just exhausted. And Willie lights a cigarette and he hands it to me, and then he lights one for himself, and we sit there smoking. And he leans over and he goes, "Hey, she was squeaking like a cunt." Which wasn't exactly like, you know, my City Slickers moment. And then he says, "You know, for a Yankee, you're all right." And he gets up and he goes back to work. I spent the rest of the 10 months working in the dairy. It was not very revolutionary. I can't say it was particularly redemptive. It was the hardest I've ever worked, and it was the proudest I've ever been of anything I've ever done. And it's because of that that "You're all right for a Yankee" is one of the nicest things that anyone has ever said to me. Thanks.